I'm afraid that what I'm going to show is going to make us a little bit less optimistic after being able to listen to how nicely we were treated by the British government at the time. So let me say right from the beginning that I have the intention to finish with a positive and optimistic finale. So that's before we start speaking about the Palestinian attitude to Balfour today. I'm not going to speak about what they did, what they thought about it at the time. So this is in Hebrew, so I'll translate for those who can't read Hebrew. I guess most of you can. It is from the official Facebook page of the Presidential Guard of Abu Mazen. It's several years ago. And this is, in essence, what they think about Balfour. From he who doesn't own to those who do not deserve. That's Balfour. And as you can see, all of those who are involved in this, Balfour himself and all the Israeli prime ministers that are on this slide are all covered with blood because in their mind, Balfour is the reason for which Palestinians suffered throughout the last century, and they should be paying the price for what they did. Here is also, I want to show you a short clip of how the Palestinian television presents the story of what happened. And this is very important because actually Balfour, the Balfour Declaration, was the reason for which the Palestinians had to start thinking about the narrative. Because beforehand, they never had a narrative, they never existed, they didn't have a narrative. But then there was Balfour. They were not involved in Balfour, they were not there. It took them like a couple of years before they realized that, wow, this is really happening. And from there on, they had to develop a narrative, and I want to present you the narrative as Abu Mazen portrays it in his book, Zionism from the Beginning to the End. That's a book of Abu Mazen, published in 1977 and republished in 2012. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but let's start with the essence of that as it is presented in the Palestinian television.
أمام مؤامرات اليهود طاقت أوروبا بوصفهم وأوصافهم واحتكارهم وفسادهم وتسلطهم وتسلقهم لأعمدة السلطة وأساسات الدولة. في العام 90 و200 وألف أصدر الملك إدوارد الأول قراراً بطرد اليهود، وتبعته فرنسا وألمانيا والنمسا وهولندا وتشيكوسلوفاكيا وإسبانيا وإيطاليا، وأحست الشعوب الأوروبية بأنها نُكبت بإيواء اليهود. اليهود مرة أخرى ينتزعون وعد بلفور وأوروبا ترى فيه حلا أمثلا للتخلص منهم.
That's what stands behind Balfour. This is part of it. Actually, two elements, according to Abu Mazen's book, stand behind Balfour. I'm going to speak about it in a minute, but just one remark on things that were said before. Interestingly enough, many people blamed the British for causing all the mess, right? Because they didn't follow Balfour right away. If you read the Peel Commission report, in their deliberation, the Peel Commission says the following: we are stupid people. We British are stupid people. Had we acted in 1917 and created a Jewish state all over Palestine, everybody would have accepted it. It was an act of war. Today, 20 years later, everybody would have lived with it. But now to create a Jewish state as an act of peace, this is something totally different. It's very difficult. It's not going to be possible to do it, and that's why they received the idea of partition from Weizmann and Sokolov and adopted it, while officially the Zionist position was different, was that there should be one state, but behind the doors, they were given this idea of partition by the Zionist leadership, and they presented it in the way they did in the Peel Commission. So ever since then, we are living with this idea of partition, and everybody referred here to this notion. But what does Abu Mazen say? Abu Mazen says the following: this idea of creating a Jewish state in Palestine is not a Jewish idea. It's an invention of the colonialists. It's an invention of all kinds of people who saw that the piece of land called Palestine or Eretz Israel has a strategic value, and it's a good idea that it will be governed by somebody who's loyal to us. That's why Koresh at the time wanted to send the Jews to live there, and they refused, of course. They preferred to stay in Iraq, or Mesopotamia of the time. And that was the idea of Napoleon in the end of the 18th century, and that was the idea of Palmerston and the idea of Disraeli and other British leaders during the 19th century. All of them were trying to convince the Jews to have a Jewish state in Palestine, and the Jews thought that this is a terrible idea and refused to it. As Edwin Montague and his friend Claude Montefiore were saying to Balfour and to Lloyd George at the time of the planning and the deliberation about the Balfour Declaration. The Jews were against it. And the entire idea is that the colonial forces, starting with Britain and later on the United States of America, thought that it's a great idea to have somebody that is loyal to us in the midst of the Arab world, so that the Arabs would not be able to unite, and the Arabs will be weakened, and the Muslims will be weakened because they will be busy fighting this state instead of fighting us, and this would be a great idea for us. Yes, they covered it with a nice cellophane that they believe in the national rights of the Jews and about the fact that the Jews are yearning to return to this piece of land, and that there is a Jewish people. But the Jews were always reluctant to accept this idea. The Jews did not think that they were one people. The Jews did not want to go to Palestine. They thought that, just as you mentioned what Montague was saying, that this is going to be a terrible place for us. And the other idea was that it's a golden opportunity to get rid of the Jews. Because how can we stand those Jews? Such terrible creatures, we don't want them around us. We have suffered them enough. We can kill two birds in one shot. Let's get rid of them. That is what Abu Mazen describes in detail, and what he's saying is, this entire issue is between us and the Brits and the colonialists, the imperialists. It's not between us and the Jews. The Jews, in general, if we deduct the Zionists out of them, the Jews without the Zionists, they are our friends. They are against the Jewish state. We should cooperate with the Jews against the Zionists. Against the Zionists, against the colonialists. And that's why today Abu Mazen and his government are trying to go forward with a legal claim against the British for establishing the state of Israel, for going on with Balfour, because they are to blame, not the Jews. Yes, the Zionists, we have a problem with the Zionists, because what happened with the Zionists later on is that they caused us further victimhood by what they did in 48 and what they did in 67, and ever since 67. But the original sin is the European sin, and that's what you saw over here. Everybody else went with the five powers, as Dr. Gautier said earlier in the morning. Five powers supported the Balfour Declaration, and by that they created this greatest crime of the last century. That's how they call it, the greatest crime of the last century. And this is, of course, totally unacceptable. This is the basic attitude of the Palestinians to the Balfour Declaration. This is the reason why we lost. And we have to blame ourselves. They don't ignore the fact that they have to blame themselves as well. We were not there. Palestinians or Arabs were not involved in the creation of the Balfour Declaration. And when they were, we had the agreements between Weizmann and Hussein, the Sharif Hussein, which actually gave legitimacy to this idea of letting the Jews have a national home in Palestine. But this was the creation of the Palestinian narrative. And from there on, the Palestinian narrative developed. And I want to clarify, what is the Palestinian narrative today? It's made of 7 pillars. First, and it goes back to exactly what Abu Mazen says about the Balfour Declaration. First, there is no Jewish people. Even the Jews, Rabbi Herman Adler, Montague, Montefiore, and others, Even the Jews admit that there is no Jewish people. That's why it was Montague who forced Balfour to add the two last paragraphs in the Balfour Declaration. Because Montague thought that doing something to the Palestinians living in Palestine is going to be terrible. We cannot afford it. It's going to be un-Jewish. So the addition was made by the Jews. So there's no Jewish people. Jews, it's only a religion. That's why the Jews are not entitled to have a state of their own. This is the core issue of the Palestinian narrative. Secondly, there is no historical sovereignty of Jews in Palestine that justifies the creation of the state of the Jews, even if they were people, which they are not, in this piece of land. No historical sovereignty. And we see it with the issue of the Temple Mount, yes, Temple Mount, no Temple Mount, and most of all, we see it, as Gutierrez mentioned, we see it with the battle, and that at that time they were already having a beginning of a narrative, in San Remo, and in the following meeting, the Palestinian Arabs were fighting against the word reconstitution. Because this admits that there was some historical sovereignty of the Jews in Palestine in the past. So they were fighting against it. No reconstitution. And we can see that even in the Balfour Declaration, this does not appear. Reconstitution does not appear in the Balfour Declaration, only in San Remo, or actually not in San Remo, in the mandate, in the preamble of the mandate. Number three is coming back to the reasons why the Jews were sent here. The Jews are terrible creatures, terrible people, especially the Zionists, of course. And today, even more so the settlers. So there's no justification that we, Palestinians, will live next to them. The fact that those European colonialists wanted to get rid of them does not justify sending them to us. What have we done wrong? And the fourth element coming out of that is that the struggle against Zionism should continue until Zionism disappears. Yes, we should be mindful of the combinations and the complexities in which we fight, in which we struggle. So you don't have always to go with your head into the wall. But we should continue struggling until we reach our victory. And this is why we keep speaking about the right of return. And this is why we continue this issue of the keys and all of that. We fight until we get rid of Zionism, because Zionism is a manifestation of evil and injustice. We cannot accept it. If we accept Zionism as a state in any piece of Palestine, this is a betrayal of the values that we should go along to which. It's impossible for us to accept a Zionist state. We shall never do that. We shall never accept a Jewish state. And that's what Abu Mazen keeps saying all the time. Lam walan. We have never and we shall never accept a Jewish state in Palestine. And number 5 out of these 7 is that we are the only victims of this conflict. We are the victims of the colonialists and we are the victims of the Zionists. And nobody else, even though we went through terrible experiences like the Shoah, nobody else can pretend that he is a victim of this conflict. We are the only victims. And because we are victims, nobody can criticize us. Definitely not those who victimize us. Definitely not the Europeans. They cannot criticize us and ask, for example, hey, what have you done with all the money we gave you? Where is it? That's not allowed for those Europeans because they are those who put us in this situation. There's no accountability and no responsibility that you can expect from a victim. Number 6 is that our struggle, and this is less seen here yet in the beginning, in 1920, it wasn't, 1921 it began. Our struggle is both Islamic and national at the same time, and it's totally intertwined. You cannot separate between the two elements of our struggle. That was the way in which Haj Amir Husseini came into the game as a both national and Islamic leader. And Izzeddin Qassam later on, so on and so forth. It's an Islamic mission to get rid of those Jews living in Palestine, as well as it is a national mission for the Palestinian people. And because of that, our struggle against colonialism is a part of the wider struggle of Islam against those who want to prevent Islam from becoming the ruling approach, the ruling faith in the world as it should be. We have to focus on this mission that we have here in Palestine, but it's a part of a much wider idea. And the last element is that our struggle is for all of Palestine. Yes, we have the phased theory, and we shall take whatever we get, but we shall never give up the final goal. And people don't understand it. When I heard many people here speak about the two-state solution, fully unaware of what the Palestinians think. The Palestinians don't believe. Palestinians don't believe in a two-state solution as a final situation. It's a phase on the way to the final goal. They do believe that if the Jews will leave Judea and Samaria, which is the real home of the Jewish people, they will have to then find a strange justification. As Gautier said, what would be the justification of living in Tel Aviv, which was never a Jewish center? But the idea is that, yes, we take whatever we can get right now, but we shall never give up the final goal. And that is why when Abu Mazen went to meet Obama in 2014, in March 2014, and was presented by the 6 points of John Kerry that had only a very feeble version of reference to a Jewish state, not recognizing Israel as a Jewish state, not only recognizing that, not recognizing, accepting the idea that there were going to be two states, one Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people and the other Palestine as the nation state of the Palestinian people, without forcing him to recognize Israel as such. Even that was rejected by him, and when he came back to the Muqata after this meeting and he spoke to his people, he said, we went, we came back, and as we stick to our promise, we are committed by the alliance with the entire land, and there is not going to be any compromise on the deposit, which is the commitment to the entire land. And everybody in the crowd shouted, "Lazim ta'raf Israel haqq al-awda la badil." Israel must know that there is no substitute to the right of return. And they understood the code that Abu Mazen was using. So it's, these 7 elements are the core of the Palestinian narrative. We have to understand it. They started building it after Balfour. They live with it in the last 100 years. Now I said I'm going to finish with something positive. Many people refer to the fact that the Balfour Declaration was possible because a very unique situation, very unique alliance of the stars, standing of the stars, as some people would say. Well, strangely enough, 100 years later, there's another very unique situation. There's a US administration that looks differently than the administrations that were in power in the last many, many years on the issue. There's a growing understanding in Europe of the Islamic threat. There's total disarray in the Middle East itself, which makes many people, just like Sharif Hussein at the time, many people in the current key positions in the Arab world are ready to look differently at Israel. And there's a change in the attitude of the Israeli public to the possibilities that are present to us. And the Arabs know about it, and the Palestinians know about it. They realize that the body politic of the Israelis is losing faith in a two-state solution or in a really stable peace agreement with the Palestinians because they doubt that there is a Palestinian partner for them. Not even Herzog or Lapid are speaking about it, not to mention the people in the government. This creates an opportunity for looking at other options that were not looked upon until recently, and people talk about regional options and other options. I'm not going to present here the options, but definitely it gives us a possibility to move towards different directions that we were used to until recently, and maybe 100 years later, we shall be able to finally move towards some sort of a settlement, maybe not a peace agreement, but some sort of a settlement with the Palestinians that may last for a longer period. Thank you very much.